A big motivation for me when I sort of decided to branch out and start my own company was my journey with disability and the need for representation, and it sort of does all tie in together.
Hello and welcome to the Disability Download, brought to you by Leonard, Cheshire. This month, Nick caught up with music publicist Isobel Williams to talk about disabled representation in the music industry and Isobel's TikTok series, Ramp of Approval. Here's Nick.
So I'm here with music PR guru and access campaigner Isobel Williams. Isobel, welcome to the Disability Download. Thanks for joining us.
Hi Nick, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Tell us a bit more about you and tell us about your job and what you do day to day.
I am a publicist working in music, and I've been working in music for nearly 10 years now, which is a very long time, but I absolutely love it. I launched my own PR company earlier this year called Lay Down PR. So it's still very early days, but I'm really enjoying it. And a big motivation for me when I sort of decided to branch out and start my own company was, I guess, my journey with disability and the need for representation, and it sort of does all tie in together. So I'm also an ambulatory wheelchair user, which is a word I've tried to say correctly. So I hope that I have, because I only ever see it written down. I never hear people say it. Um, but that's definitely fueled and motivated the path that I'm currently on, which is one of wanting to contribute to disabled representation and contribute to a more accessible world.
Fantastic. Your job sounds brilliant. So you mentioned that you have a disability yourself, and you've been keen to share more about your condition so that it's better understood. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, absolutely. I live with a condition called POTS, which stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And I became unwell for the first time in 1998, which is a very long time ago. And I didn't get my POTS diagnosis until 2016. One of the big reasons why I'm very sort of motivated to educate people about POTS is because it's so hard to get diagnosed with, but it's very easy to diagnose. So it seems like a really achievable thing to pump energy into. To tell you sort of a little bit more about POTS, POTS is a condition that affects the autonomic system, and the autonomic system is the sort of nervous system that controls all the things your body should do automatically. So, for example, heart rate, blood pressure, temperature control, digestion, all these things that should be sort of working in the background when you have POTS. They often or are frequently or constantly malfunctioning. The P that stands for postural, that sort of represents the fact that for a lot of people with POTS, the symptoms are triggered when you stand. So for me personally, I can stand for about a minute, but during that time, my heart rate will go faster and faster, and my blood pressure will go lower and lower. So if
Okay.
I was to continue to stand, I would eventually pass out. And the fact that all this stuff is going on in the background and malfunctioning means that I live with many, many horrible symptoms, such as fatigue, dizziness, tachycardia, headaches, migraines, all sorts of things. So it's not a life-threatening condition, but it's very much a life-altering condition, and I would say it's heavily dominated every choice I've ever made in my life, and sort of everything that I have in place now has all been sort of dictated by my illness. It's, like, definitely engulfed my whole life, but not necessarily always in a bad way, but it definitely has been in the driver's seat.
That leads me on very nicely to um, The Ramp of Approval, which is a brilliant video series that you've launched. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your kind words about the ramp of approval. So yeah, I guess it's like it's a TikTok series. So I've been using a wheelchair for the last 4 or so years. And initially, I found it really difficult, and it was such an adjustment, not just in terms of accessibility, but in the way that I found I was treated and how people saw me. And I benefited so much from following disabled content creators, seeing other people navigating illnesses like mine online and sort of calling out things that weren't right. It allowed me to be able to reflect and see that it's not my fault. I could identify then the issues and ableism that I maybe wasn't aware of. And because I benefited so much from consuming other disabled people's content, now I felt, or when I started making them, I felt like I was at a point where I sort of wanted to pay it forward. So even though starting to post on TikTok in your mid 30s does not feel like a natural choice, yeah, I just decided to go for it, and I came up with the concept of the ramp of approval. I can't really remember how, but yeah, I just started reviewing places that I was going to, and um, either awarding the ramp of approval or not awarding the ramp of approval. And it's been really fun. And I think I've had some really nice feedback from mostly people I know, just in that their eyes have really been opened by, seeing accessibility laid out in that way. Because I think disabled people, of course, are so in the know about the lack of accessibility, and they're already fighting the same battle. But I think sometimes people that don't know someone or isn't disabled themselves or have access into that world, they don't think about it. So I think it's really eye-opening for people, but it's hard. I think it's always going to be hard to make people that aren't disabled care. um and that's something I just want to try and do. And I know there's loads of disabled people trying to do the same, which is really amazing. And so it's just, I guess I've wanted to do this to contribute to the all hands on deck kind of approach.
Well, I think you do a really good job of it, and by injecting a really good dose of humour as well, and it leads people into it. You said that you mentioned that you're worried that not every non-disabled person might take notice. I think humour is a really good way of drawing people in, and well done for making it so entertaining. You mentioned as well, not just access barriers, but attitudinal barriers that you encountered early on as a disabled person, and ableism. Can you expand more on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think initially when I started going out and about using a wheelchair, and my times of going out and about on foot in a more typical way were still sort of fresh in my mind, I really, really felt a difference. It's just little things like um, previously, before I used a wheelchair, if I was getting hassled in a pub by a weirdo, or someone had come up to me in the street and was perhaps overstaying their welcome in terms of conversation, someone would usually come to the rescue. Someone would say, like, "Oh, are you okay?" I'm aware that some people, don't get that, and I'm a white female presenting woman, so I have to acknowledge that that's a privilege. But it's highlighted how people see disabled people, because I don't get that anymore. I think if I'm getting hassled in the street by someone, people don't sort of look to want to help, which is eye opening. And I think it's interesting that, I don't know, I think I've noticed how people care a lot less about upsetting a disabled person or not accommodating. I think people often don't
Mm.
care. I think that is because for a lot of people, they see disabled people as a different species to them, so they can't relate. And I think because of that, they just care a lot less. I'm naturally, I think, a people pleaser. And so when I review somewhere and it has bad accessibility and I'm ultimately saying something negative, I feel really bad for doing that. But then I have to tell myself, well, they don't, one, they obviously don't feel bad because they don't need to be unaccessible in this way. It's probably a choice or an oversight. But also, they obviously don't care that I'm going to be bothered by it, or they would have had provided a better service in the first place. But I
Mm.
still feel like, oh, I don't want to say anything bad. But yeah, I try to push myself a little bit out of that zone because I don't owe them anything.
No. And so how do you find that places react then when you tell them? Uh, when do you tell them actually? Do you often tell them during during the time you're reviewing, or is it just afterwards and they can find out in the video?
So a combination. I like to give people the opportunity if something is bad, to sort of just tweak or change things. Generally speaking, it's little things like perhaps somewhere hasn't listed their access. They haven't made the information available about their accessibility. That is something that I encounter very frequently, and it's such a tiny tiny thing. And when a pub or a restaurant or a venue is listing, in their frequently asked questions, can I wear trainers, yet they don't list, can we even bloody get in there? I find that so frustrating. But when I flag that to places, I would say 8 out of 10 times they probably are happy to add the information. I think quite often a barrier is they're worried about saying the wrong thing. So on a
Mm.
number of occasions, I've said, like, I'm more than happy to advise if you're unsure about the language to use. And obviously, I do use the disclaimer that I'm not qualified, but I can, I guess, just give them a bit of a confidence boost. Because it is common sense at the end of the day, just put the information there and then disabled people can decide for themselves if it's going to work.
Yeah.
Um, I think an issue is as well that somewhere might say it's accessible, but different people have a different definition of accessible. For a lot of people, accessible means there's not stairs, but it might not necessarily mean that there's a ground floor bathroom. Um, in which case, it isn't accessible.
Mm.
So I think that's something that I encounter. But I do think people are willing to update things and are open to input. But it does seem, just from my experiences, you know, out there on the mean streets, it does seem like people are just concerned that they're going to say the wrong thing, and so it feels safer to say nothing. When in actual fact, they do kind of owe us just the facts so that we can use our time in the way that we want to and not have to end up, going door to door to venues trying to find an accessible bathroom because we're rummaging around in the dark looking for access information.
Absolutely. And so, in terms of the physical access barriers that you encounter, what might those be?
Um, so yeah, I suppose steps. Um, Quite often, I think not having a ground floor bathroom is a big issue for a lot of places. I think in London, it's really hard because there's a lot of old buildings. Um, and I think they can't perhaps tailor their buildings or make changes. Again, that's why it's just important to have your information out there so that people can decide what works for them. I find working in music, a lot of these smaller live music venues aren't accessible. There's a lot of venues in basements and,
Mm.
upstairs above pubs and things like that. I would say that is a big issue that I encounter frequently, especially with the kind of grassroots venues. Um, I would say probably 70% of them aren't wheelchair accessible. So obviously that's an issue.
Mm.
Um, And yeah, I guess it is just the sort of standard access things. And then I do find as well, quite often, if places are on paper accessible, it's still not particularly like user friendly. So sometimes it can feel like a venue has done a bit of a tick box exercise, which is better than nothing. Obviously, we'll take what we can get, but they haven't perhaps thought about how it might feel, or considered that actually disabled people want to have a nice time as well as everyone else, rather than just like getting in there and having a rubbish view. And yes, there's the accessible bathroom, but you have to ask a security guard to take you down to the bathroom. They don't think that actually maybe we wouldn't want that, or maybe we want the freedom. I think
Yeah.
we don't have true access until you can go out as a wheelchair user and have to rush to the toilet to be sick because you've done too many shots. Like, that isn't something a disabled person can do. If you've got to go to the bar, ask for the bouncer, or go, ask to be taken somewhere, or led round the back to another door. We want the freedom to do that.
Yeah. And what makes a place stand out as particularly good for wheelchair users in your experience?
I think if you look at the website of somewhere before you go there, and it explains clearly the access, I think you're already onto a winner. I think that's so good. I have had some really good experiences. Um, and obviously, I try not to only speak about the negative sides of, access, because some places really do provide a great service.
And in terms of features, do you breathe a sigh of relief when you finally see a properly large, accessible bathroom with all the facilities in the right place?
Yeah, that's so great. That is the jackpot, really. I think as well, so I can stand for short periods. If a venue has a ground floor bathroom, I can make that work, but it's not my preferred choice. As someone in a wheelchair, if I stand up to go and use the bathroom, people do tend to stare, and that isn't my issue. But it's just an extra thing to think about. I also don't want to leave my wheelchair,
Yeah.
just because I'm always. I mean, I'd hope no one would steal it, but you can't really be too careful these days.
No.
So yeah, I think if somewhere has step-free access and a accessible bathroom, that is just so great. And I love it when you almost don't expect it, and then somewhere really surprises you. Um, that's
Yeah.
really a great
Yeah.
feeling.
Absolutely. In your latest video, you very helpfully uh, sorted out the alarm for a particular venue. Can you just explain the bugbear that disabled people like us often get with alarms in accessible bathrooms?
Yeah, so there's usually sort of a red emergency pull cord in a accessible bathroom. So if you take a tumble or you need help, you can pull it, and the help will come to you. So it's a really important and essential safety feature. But very, very often people tie up these cords to, like, get them out of the way, which is so counterproductive and like totally defeats the point of having one. It's just so ridiculous that that's the thing that people do, and that we're faced with. So I always make a point of untangling it, or there's been times where if they're very, very short, I will mention it, and I'll just say, what's going on here. It's quite rare that somebody, if they take a tumble, also happens to have arms that are 2 meters long to be able to pull such a short cord. So it's yeah, it's ridiculous.
And is there anything else that has shocked or surprised you in terms of good or bad accessibility?
I would say I'm frequently shocked at, and maybe this isn't so much accessibility, but it's something that I'm frequently shocked by, is how free people feel to ask why I'm in a wheelchair.
Mm.
I have a general rule that if someone hasn't asked my name, they shouldn't ask why I'm in a wheelchair. So, it comes up naturally in conversation. If you want to invest 5 minutes in a general back and forth, just two normal people having a conversation, it will probably come up. And I'm
Yeah.
happy to acknowledge the natural curiosity. I'm not trying to keep it. I'm in a position where I'm comfortable to talk about my situation, and so I'm not looking to hold that back. So if they just take a little bit of time to chat, I will give up the goods. But yeah, literally a couple of weeks ago, I was in Tesco, and the cashier, have you got a Tesco card? Yes, I have. Here you go. Were you in an accident? And it's like, what? How is that a natural interaction? So you want me to just display my what could potentially be the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to me? It just seems like madness that people think that that is appropriate, and it happens all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Same as people grabbing my wheelchair and maneuvering me without asking. I guess that is almost the same as someone picking someone up and moving them. That's exactly
Mm.
how it feels, and that happens all the time. Um, so I think that's always shocking, but it is just, I believe the issue is lack of representation. People are unfamiliar with disabled people because they don't see them in sort of mainstream media enough. And so they have, I guess it's made it seem as though there's a different species and people just forget all their social etiquette around disabled people. So yeah, but it does make for some funny stories.
It does indeed. I can relate to what a lot of what you're saying as a fellow disabled person and fellow wheelchair user. It's been a really enjoyable chat so far as well. Before we take a break, you're going to tell me about one of the artists that you're working with at Lay Down PR. Um, Elle Shant, I believe her name is. So it's a UK disabled artist that you've got on your roster, and it sounds really exciting. Can you tell me a bit more about Elle?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm really excited to be working with Elle. When I launched Lay Down PR, I invited disabled and neurodivergent artists to sort of apply for a free press campaign, which is something I wanted to do in line with my launch, just to sort of really hammer home my ethos that I really want to break down barriers within the music industry. And I mean, for a non-disabled artist at the best of times, there are barriers there. It's really difficult to sort of get yourself out there as an emerging artist. But
Mm.
I guess I have an inside look into the additional barriers that disabled people are faced with. So when I started Lay Down, I thought that's something that I'd really like to do, and I would really love to work with more disabled artists. So when I sort of put out the call, the standard was really, really high, and it was so hard to select just one artist. Um, but I selected Elle, so we're going to be working together in the new year. Um, she's gearing up to release some really, really incredible new music, and I'm very excited to just get stuck into the campaign. She's based in Birmingham, and her sound is like it's very atmospheric. I think the experiences that someone has as a disabled person, if you can creatively like pump that into your music, you know, the potential is the sky's the limit for the potential, because what incredible insights into life and the different outlooks that you may find yourself having, I think is so cool. And if you can then, put that into your music, I think it makes for something that's, yeah, really special. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, I can't wait to get started. So watch this space for the new stuff.
Brilliant. And I think we've got an existing track from Elle at the moment, so let's have a listen to that.
Once you come my life, you dance like fire on a cold night, hands reaching high and your eyes so bright. Oh, when you come alive. Oh, my darling, once you come alive, you dance like fire on a cold night, hands reaching high and your eyes so bright. Oh, when you come alive. A wonderful world, you're just for you tonight. Oh my, oh when you come alive.
That was a great track from Elle. Thank you for telling me all about her. Can't wait to see more of what she does. So you mentioned earlier the kind of interaction that you get on social media with other disabled people. Can you tell me a bit more about that and what they've said in reaction to Ramp of Approval? Because it seems to me you can't fail to be to to be impressed by it really, and to be drawn into it and relate to it, whether you're disabled or not.
Well, thank you again for your kind words on the round of approval, Nick. It's much appreciated. Um, I think, yeah, the response has been really, really nice. I think there's been a lot of people that have, yeah, definitely been able to relate to the issues that I've encountered. And it's really great that people will comment and share their like sort of similar experiences. I really, really love to see that. I think it feels like when I put out a video addressing an issue, feels like the tiniest little tip of the iceberg, and you just know that there's like things much worse and bigger, and you know, there's just so much more sort of out there that isn't quite right. Um, but it's been really lovely to be able to sort of tap into the disabled community and you know, yeah, follow other people and I think that's been really, really good and really beneficial. And I hope that in the same way that I benefited from seeing people like me, people going through similar things with their health, as much as I benefited from seeing them, I hope that, you know, the next generation of people can benefit from seeing me and then maybe they'll want to pay it forward and start making their videos and stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, it feels really good. I really do love it when people comment and they relate or say they like the video.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about the responses you get from venues. Have they responded to your videos as well?
Yeah, they have done. Generally, I would say people are really happy when I share the positive experiences about the access. I think that's been really good. And it's also been great when they've come to me and said, like, what can we do better? The times in which I feel like I've been transparent about perhaps not a great experience, I haven't really received much backlash, even though I'm always worried that I will. And I think that I remind myself that actually people aren't really that like people don't really tend to feel too guilty about letting disabled people down. That is how it can feel. I
Yeah.
don't think that that's always the case, but it's definitely how it feels some of the time.
Mm.
Um, there was a incident that I experienced in Soho. I wanted to go into a restaurant with my friend, and we asked if they had a ramp, and they just said, no, we don't cater to disabled people. And I felt really
What?
bad, sort of flagging that. So I did it sort of sheepishly at the end of another video. I just like mentioned about it. But then also, they obviously, you know, I think they obviously don't care about upsetting the disabled community or they wouldn't say that sort of thing. So I have to remind myself of that. Like, you know, I'm just saying exactly what happened. It's not really for me to feel bad about. It's hopefully just going to implement change or just things will remain exactly the same.
But
Um,
people will know about it,
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah, yeah, well done for flagging it. It's very important. And so yeah, that's it's been really good. Thanks, Isabel. And I would really encourage everyone to check out Run for Approval. The videos are really fun, really humorous, and you learn a lot as well. Um, how can people how can people find you on social media, and how can people find Ramp of Approval first of all, and then how do they find Lay Down PR?
So ramp approval, you can find it on TikTok, and the handle is it's actually not that it's not that catchy or easy to remember, but it's Isobel Williams.
It sounds good though.
Yeah, it does. I wanted it to match my Instagram. I couldn't get it to match, so I've had to change the O in Isabelli Welly to a 0. But I wonder if you put the round for approval in, maybe just the algorithm will do its thing.
Yes, it does.
Oh, great. Okay.
And it's all. We'll put it in the show notes, and we'll make sure that that people can access it there, and and lay down PR. How do people get onto that?
That's much easier. It's laydownpr.com, and on Instagram it's laydownpr. I don't want to say that that's why I named it Laydown PR, but it did definitely contribute to the name choice. The fact that I was able to get the .com and the Laydown PR handle on everything. So yeah, I feel really smug about that actually.
Well, it's a great name. Can you explain a bit more for anyone who hasn't guessed why it's such a good name for someone with your condition?
Yeah, definitely. So the way in which I've been working over particularly the last couple of years, as my condition hasn't been great, is I do work, I would say like 80 or 90% lying down. So it made sense to call it Lay Down PR, and I'm sure not many people will assume I've called it that because I'm running it lying down, but the reality is I'm running it lying down.
Excellent. Good on you. And what's coming up for you in the future, and what have you got to look forward to?
What's coming up in the future? Great question. I think if we were to sort of say, what's the 5-year plan here? What I would love to do is, without putting too much pressure on myself, I would love to grow the ramp of approval and continue to build it. And if I could then, build a bit of a platform, and if it did generate sort of revenue, if we were getting enough views and things like that, I would love to reinvest any money I make through the ramp of approval into sort of funding the PR for disabled artists. That is like my end goal. If I could create a sort of ramp of approval fund, and then invest that into just giving opportunities to disabled artists, to mean that the music industry has more representation, and people's favorite pop stars might not only be their favorite pop stars but also offer disabled representation. That is what I would absolutely love, but that could be a million years off. That's the ultimate goal, almost fantasy football level.
No, as someone that loves fantasy football, I'd say it's more realistic than that, and more achievable than even I, as a football nerd, will ever get to any success on fantasy football. So yeah, it's I think that's a great goal to have, and I really hope you get there, and some nice synergy between both of your passions there. What else do you like doing in your leisure time? When you get a bit of chill time?
I love a good old fashioned socialize. I love a little cheeky beer with friends. I really do love to socialize. I also get a lot of pleasure from watching sort of trashy TV, and I love listening to a good podcast. Actually, at the moment, I'm really enjoying the killer combination of playing Stardew Valley and listening to a podcast or audiobook. That for me is pure relaxation. But yeah, I think I would love to list off some more meaningful hobbies, but I think that is the reality.
What's Stardew Valley for the uninitiated like me?
So Stardew Valley is a game available on Nintendo Switch, and you can basically, if you think of sort of kind of, I guess, The Sims, SimCity, that sort of thing, but you're building a farm.
Okay, yeah. I'm with you now.
I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend it, but I must put out a disclaimer to say, please exercise caution. It is very addictive.
Okay. Okay. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for all of your time, Isobel. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, please do check out the Ramp Approval and Lay Down PR. They're both awesome. Hope you discover some great new artists and some really entertaining videos. Thanks so much, Isobel.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for listening to this month's episode. We're sad to say that this will be the last episode of the Disability Download. We want to say thanks so much to all our guests, and above all, a huge thank you to our listeners for every download, share, and moment you've spent with us. To keep up with us and see what we're up to in 2025, you can follow us on social media. On LinkedIn, search for Leonard Cheshire, and on Instagram, it's @Leonard Cheshire. This has been the Disability Download.